Let's have a little fun with an autumn leaf shape. So I'm going to go with a very stylised oak leaf shape. I'm going to start with a little triangle at the start here. That tapers in. And then around that we're going to have a little bump, another little bump, and then at the end we have a third bump with a tip on it that goes into a fourth one round the corner. I'm just going to turn the page a little there, and then a little wiggle there, and a little wiggle there. It's a very, very basic stylised oak leaf shape. I'm going to do another one here. Very, very similar. A wiggle, a wiggle, a wiggle with a bump on the end, and then 3 wiggles of varying shapes down the other side. It really, really doesn't matter how precise they are. I just want them at all different angles on my page. So another wiggle, bump on the end, wiggle, 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 and around. So they're not even, they're not identical, but I really, really quite like the shape. They're really rather sweet. So I'm going to fill this entire page with these sorts of shapes. Okay. All at a slightly different angle. So I'm going to be moving my page quite regularly. It always makes it easier if you've got the page angled to suit your hand. Now I'm working with a Sharpie pen, which is a permanent ink that will bond permanently with this watercolour paper that I've got in this little notebook. And I want it to bond permanently with the paper. You see this one's a little smaller, it's only got 2 wiggles down the side, but the shape is still really rather sweet. Yes, I'd like it to bond permanently with the paper, this black ink, because then I'm going to go over the top with watercolours. Another little one there with a double wiggle down the side. And then, obviously, if the ink has bonded beautifully with the paper, chances are when I put my watercolours over it, that's not going to make the black line run. Okay, so I'm going to carry on doing all of this to fill the whole page with as many different angles on my leaves as possible. Now the next stage of this is to turn to our watercolour paints. Now this is a range of browns and oranges and yellows that I've picked out. I've got a cadmium red, I've got a burnt umber, burnt sienna, I've got raw umber there, yellow ochre, cadmium red, cadmium orange, and a cadmium yellow. And I've activated these paints a couple of minutes ago, so by dropping a little bit of water on the top of each of them just before I started my drawing. I haven't finished the whole page. I've decided I'm going to leave a bit blank. I just want to get a bit of colour on it, because that's, after all, what I'm really looking forward to doing with this. So I'm starting with some of my cadmium orange here, and I'm basically just going to colour each of my leaves in a different colour with my watercolour. So I've mixed it so it's a fairly creamy consistency, and the idea is to colour in every leaf using all of these different colours. The plan is not necessarily to do too close to each other the same colour, so I might dot my oranges around. Maybe I'll do this one orange as well over here. But it's really therapeutic doing this. Now the other thing I might do is drop a second colour in to allow the colours to blend and see what happens with that. Bring some of that wet around that side there. So I might pick up a slightly darker colour and drop that in. You can see that there and see if that blends in. I'll come back and do the stalks a bit later, but I quite like dropping darker colours into lighter colours while they're still wet and just allowing the water to do a little bit of magic, allowing that to spread. They don't all have to have 2 colours in. You can just stick to the colours that you like and just do them all one colour. The thing to remember is that this is your piece of work and you get to do it your way. And there's no pressure on it. I mean, if any of your leaves are wobbly or not quite the right shape, don't worry about it. Just keep going. If you don't like working with the black Sharpie directly onto the paper, you could always sketch out your leaves in pencil and then go over top with the Sharpie and then rub your pencil out afterwards. That's one way of doing it. But the whole point of this exercise is for it to be as low pressure as possible and not to get stressed about it. Oops, a little bit too much water on that one. Now I quite like the dual light colours up against the white background, so I'm going to be leaving my background white. But of course, if you'd like a different colour background, then you can always fill in the gaps with something else. And of course, you don't have to stick with leaf colours. You can go pink, you can go blue, any colour of the rainbow really. So I'm going to do a little bit of yellow here. This is cadmium yellow, which is just such a gorgeous colour. Look how bright and cheerful that is. I like that one. Always a colour that cheers me up. There we go. And of course you can pick another colour to do the stalks. Painting something like this is a really good way to still racing thoughts. It's a brilliant way to sort of focus on something creative and take your mind off anything else that might be bugging you. It's also, because it's watercolours and therefore non-toxic, the sort of thing that you could, if you've got room, leave out on maybe your dining room table or some other surface and keep coming back to. So you don't have to sit down for an hour or two to create the whole thing. You can just start it off in sort of 5 or 10 minutes that you've got to spare, and you can keep coming back to it as and when you've got a little bit of time to carry on. It'll just sit there waiting for you, which kind of takes the pressure out of it and makes it more likely that you will maybe stick to something and finish the whole thing. Because it can be very difficult, if you know you're going to get distracted, to actually find the energy to start something, particularly if you're incredibly busy and you're working and juggling all sorts of things. Well, that's what I do anyway. So I need to stop that at the moment because I've got to go and do some bits and pieces, but I'm really pleased with the way that colour works against the background. I've really enjoyed doing it, and I'm going to leave it out here and come back to it and keep going when I've got a spare minute. If you think that looks like fun, I hope you give it a go and enjoy, and maybe see you again next time.